Welcome, friends. This is a complete movie review. So let's move. The story of The Protector 2 begins in modern day Thailand, where a highly skilled and disciplined fighter named Kham, portrayed by Tony Jaa, is living a simple, peaceful, and isolated life away from the chaos of the world, surrounded by nature and far from the violence that once defined his journey. And at the center of his life is his beloved elephant, which is not just an animal for him, but a symbol of his heritage, his family values, and a deep emotional connection that represents loyalty, honor, and tradition. Everything in his life seems balanced and calm at this point as he focuses on protecting and caring for the elephant while staying away from trouble. However, beneath this peaceful surface, the outside world continues to grow darker as criminal organizations expand their power and influence, especially in urban areas where illegal activities like animal trafficking, underground fighting, and organized crime networks operate without fear. And these powerful groups are constantly searching for valuable assets that can strengthen their control, eventually leading them to target something as unique and valuable as Kham's elephant. The situation takes a sudden and violent turn when a group of well organized criminals launches a carefully planned attack, catching Kham off guard and creating chaos within seconds. The attack is fast, aggressive, and strategic, showing that this is not a random act but part of a larger operation. During this moment, Kham tries to resist and protect what belongs to him, but the criminals manage to overpower the situation and escape with the elephant, leaving Kham behind in a state of shock, anger, and emotional devastation. Because for him, this loss is not just physical but deeply personal as it connects to everything he stands for. This moment becomes the main turning point of the story where his peaceful life ends and his warrior side returns. Without wasting any time, Kham makes the decision to leave his home and step back into the dangerous world he once tried to escape. his mission is now clear and simple but extremely risky, which is to track down the people responsible and bring his elephant back at any cost. As he enters the city, the entire tone of the film shifts dramatically from calm to intense because the urban environment is filled with crime, corruption, and hidden power structures where every street can be dangerous and every person can be connected to something bigger. Unlike his rural life, where everything was straightforward, the city is complex and unpredictable. Kham must rely entirely on his instincts, strength, and fighting skills as he begins searching for clues. His investigation quickly leads him to small groups of criminals who are part of the larger network, and this is where the first major action sequences begin, as these criminals initially underestimate him, thinking he is just another man looking for trouble. But within moments, they realize that they are facing someone extremely dangerous. Kham's fighting style is raw, powerful, and highly effective as he uses Muay Thai techniques combined with his surroundings to defeat multiple opponents. He does not waste energy, and every move he makes has purpose. He uses walls, furniture, and nearby objects as extensions of his attacks, making the fights feel realistic and intense rather than exaggerated. These early encounters establish him as a one man force capable of taking down entire groups without hesitation. However, these actions do not go unnoticed as word begins to spread within the criminal network about a man who is destroying their operations. This draws attention from higher level figures within the organization who begin to see Kham as a serious threat rather than a minor problem. At the same time, the story introduces a parallel investigation led by a determined female police officer who is working to expose and dismantle the same criminal network. Her approach is structured, strategic, and based on legal procedures, creating a strong contrast with Kham, who operates outside the system and follows his own rules driven by emotion and personal motivation. Both characters are moving toward the same goal but from completely different directions, which adds depth to the story. Meanwhile, within the criminal organization, tension begins to rise as reports of Kham's actions reach the leaders who control the network. They realize that his presence could disrupt their entire system if not handled quickly, so they begin sending more skilled and dangerous fighters to stop him. These are not ordinary criminals but trained individuals with unique fighting styles and abilities, making the challenge much greater for Kham as he continues his journey deeper into enemy territory. As the story progresses, it becomes clear that the kidnapping of the elephant is only a small part of a much larger operation involving control over illegal markets and exploitation of valuable resources. Kham slowly starts understanding that he is not just fighting a group of kidnappers, but an entire system built on power and corruption. Despite this realization, he does not stop or hesitate because his motivation is stronger than fear. He continues moving forward step by step, gathering information and getting closer to the truth, each fight bringing him nearer to the core of the organization. By the end of this part, Kham manages to uncover important clues about where his elephant might be taken, but at the same time, he realizes that the enemies he is facing are far more powerful and organized than he initially expected. This sets the stage for a much bigger conflict where strength alone may not be enough, and he will have to face not only physical challenges but also strategic and emotional ones. His journey has officially begun, but the real battle is still ahead, and everything from this point forward will test his limits like never before. As the story of The Protector 2 continues, Kham, portrayed by Tony Jaa, moves deeper into the dangerous urban underworld where every step brings him closer to the truth but also increases the level of threat surrounding him. After the initial encounters with low level criminals, he begins to understand that the kidnapping of his elephant is not an isolated incident but part of a highly organized network that operates with precision, power, and strong connections. This realization forces him to shift his approach from simple searching to strategic tracking as he starts targeting individuals who are directly connected to the higher levels of the organization. Each confrontation provides him with small pieces of information that slowly build a bigger picture, but at the same time, these actions alert the syndicate that someone is systematically dismantling their operations, causing tension within the criminal network as they try to identify and stop the source of the disruption. Meanwhile, the film begins to introduce more of the key figures behind the organization, including powerful leaders who operate behind the scenes and rarely expose themselves directly. These individuals control large parts of the illegal trade, including animal trafficking and underground fighting circuits where captured animals are used for profit and entertainment. The environment becomes more intense as Kham realizes that his elephant may be part of a larger system where cruelty and exploitation are normalized. This adds emotional weight to his mission because now he is not just trying to recover what belongs to him but also witnessing the suffering caused by these networks. During this phase, Kham's journey takes him through different parts of the city, including hidden warehouses, underground arenas, and heavily guarded locations where illegal activities take place. Each location presents a new challenge and a new set of enemies. The fights become more complex as the opponents are no longer simple street criminals but trained fighters with specific combat styles. Some rely on brute strength, while others use speed, weapons, or coordinated attacks, forcing Kham to adapt quickly and use every skill he has learned. His fighting style continues to stand out because of its raw realism and effectiveness. He combines powerful strikes with environmental awareness, turning confined spaces into advantages rather than limitations. And this ability allows him to defeat multiple opponents even in difficult situations. However, the intensity of these battles also begins to take a toll on him physically and mentally, showing that even someone as skilled as Kham is not invincible. At the same time, the parallel storyline involving the female police officer continues to develop as she gets closer to uncovering the same network that Kham is fighting against. Her investigation reveals important details about the structure of the organization, including its connections to influential figures and hidden operations that extend beyond the city. She begins to notice patterns in the incidents reported across different locations and realizes that there is a central force controlling everything. Although she is unaware of Kham's full involvement at this stage, their paths are slowly moving toward each other, creating anticipation for their eventual interaction. Meanwhile, within the criminal organization, the leaders become increasingly concerned about the damage being caused. Reports of their men being defeated and their operations being disrupted create pressure on them to act quickly. They begin sending more dangerous enforcers who are specifically trained to handle high level threats. These individuals are not only physically strong but also experienced in dealing with fighters like Kham, making them far more challenging opponents. One of the key moments in this part comes when Kham faces a group of elite fighters in a confined and controlled environment where escape is nearly impossible. This fight pushes him to his limits as he must rely on both his physical strength and quick thinking to survive. The sequence highlights his ability to remain focused under pressure and adapt to rapidly changing situations. Despite the overwhelming odds, he manages to defeat his opponents but not without difficulty. This moment reinforces the idea that the challenges ahead will only become more difficult as Kham continues his mission. He finally obtains a crucial piece of information that points him toward a major location connected to the criminal network. This discovery suggests that his elephant may have been moved to a central facility where high value targets are kept before being sold or used for illegal purposes. This revelation raises the stakes significantly because reaching such a location will require him to face the full strength of the organization. At the same time, it becomes clear that the syndicate is now fully aware of Kham's identity and intentions, turning him from a hidden threat into a direct target. This means that from this point forward, he will not only be searching but also constantly hunted, adding another layer of danger to his journey. As the second part comes to an end, the tension reaches a higher level with both sides preparing for a larger confrontation. Kham is now closer than ever to finding his elephant, but also deeper inside a system controlled by powerful and ruthless enemies. The situation is no longer about simple fights or small victories, but about survival against an entire network, setting the stage for even more intense action, stronger enemies, and a battle that will test his limits in ways he has never experienced before. As the story of The Protector 2 moves forward, the intensity continues to rise as Kham, portrayed by Tony Jaa, gets closer to the core of the criminal organization, and with every step he takes, the situation becomes more dangerous because he is no longer dealing with small groups or isolated fighters, but with a system that is now fully aware of his presence and actively working to eliminate him. After discovering clues about a central facility connected to the network, Kham begins planning his next move more carefully because he understands that rushing in without strategy could lead to failure. However, his approach still remains direct and fearless as he continues tracking individuals linked to this location. During this phase, the film expands the scope of the criminal world by showing how deeply connected the organization is with different layers of power, including businessmen, underground leaders, and corrupt figures who benefit from these illegal operations. This reveals that the network is not just about physical strength, but also about influence and control, making it even more difficult to take down. At the same time, Kham's actions begin creating a ripple effect within the organization as fear starts spreading among lower level members who have witnessed or heard about his abilities. Some begin to hesitate while others become more aggressive in an attempt to prove themselves. This imbalance creates tension within the group and leads to mistakes that Kham uses to his advantage. His ability to read situations and act quickly allows him to exploit these weaknesses, leading to more intense and strategic confrontations. One of the key aspects of this part is the introduction of stronger and more unique opponents who challenge Kham in different ways. These fighters are not only skilled but also have distinct styles that force him to adapt constantly. Some rely on speed and agility, while others use brute force or unconventional techniques, making each fight unpredictable and visually engaging. The action sequences become more complex as they take place in different environments such as narrow corridors, multi level buildings, and crowded spaces where movement is restricted. Kham uses his surroundings intelligently, turning obstacles into opportunities and maintaining control even when outnumbered. However, these battles are not easy, and the physical toll on him becomes more visible as he begins to show signs of exhaustion and injury, adding realism to his character and emphasizing that every victory comes with a cost. Meanwhile, the parallel storyline involving the female police officer continues to develop as she gathers more evidence about the criminal network and begins connecting the dots between different incidents. Her investigation leads her closer to the same central facility that Kham is targeting, and although she still operates within the law, she starts realizing that the system she relies on may not be strong enough to handle such a powerful organization. This creates internal conflict within her character as she struggles between following procedure and taking more direct action. As her path gets closer to Kham's, the possibility of cooperation or confrontation becomes more likely. On the other side, the leaders of the criminal organization begin taking more serious measures as they recognize that Kham is not just a threat but a potential force that could expose or destroy their operations. They deploy their most trusted enforcers and tighten security around key locations, especially the central facility where high value assets are kept. This location becomes the focal point of the story as it represents both Kham's goal and the strongest defense of the organization. As Kham moves closer to this target, he faces one of his most challenging encounters. Yet, when he is ambushed by a group of elite fighters in a controlled environment designed to trap him, this sequence tests not only his physical abilities but also his mental strength as he must stay focused under extreme pressure. The fight is intense and prolonged with both sides pushing their limits, and although Kham manages to survive and defeat his opponents, he emerges from the encounter more aware of the level of danger he is facing. This moment marks a turning point where the mission becomes even more serious and the stakes feel higher than ever. As he recovers and prepares for his next move, Kham finally confirms that his elephant is indeed being held within the central facility controlled by the organization. This discovery gives him a clear objective but also places him directly against the strongest defenses of the enemy. At the same time, the organization prepares for his arrival by reinforcing security and setting traps, turning the upcoming confrontation into a battle of strength, strategy, and survival. As this part comes to an end, the tension reaches a peak with both sides fully aware of what is coming. Kham is ready to take the next step toward his goal while the criminal network prepares to stop him at any cost, setting the stage for a major conflict that will determine the direction of the story and push the action to its highest level so far. As the story of the Protector 2 continues to intensify, Kham, portrayed by Tony Jaa, now stands at the edge of his most dangerous mission yet as he prepares to infiltrate the central facility where his elephant is being held. And this location is not just another hideout, but the core of the criminal organization's operations, heavily guarded, strategically designed, and filled with some of the most dangerous fighters under the control of the syndicate. After everything he has faced so far, Kham understands that this step will require more than just strength because the enemies waiting inside are fully prepared and aware of his abilities. Yet, despite the risks, he does not hesitate because his motivation remains stronger than fear. As he approaches the facility, the environment itself reflects the scale of the organization, with high security, controlled entry points, and constant surveillance, making it clear that breaking in will not be easy. Kham begins by observing the area, carefully studying guard movements and identifying weak points in the structure, showing a more strategic side of his character compared to his earlier direct approach. However, once he makes his move, the situation quickly escalates into intense action as he is forced into multiple confrontations while navigating through the facility. The fights in this part are more complex and high stakes as they take place in tight and controlled environments such as corridors, storage areas, and multi level sections where every move matters. Kham continues to rely on his Muay Thai skills but now combines them with sharper awareness and calculated decisions, using timing and positioning to overcome enemies who are stronger and more coordinated than those he faced before. At the same time, the organization activates its internal defenses as alarms begin to spread through the facility and more fighters are deployed to stop him. This creates a constant sense of pressure as Kham is not only fighting but also racing against time to reach his goal before being completely surrounded. Meanwhile, the parallel storyline involving the female police officer reaches a critical point as she gathers enough evidence to identify the central facility as a major hub of illegal operations. Realizing the scale of what she is dealing with, she begins preparing for a coordinated action against the organization, but the system around her moves slowly and is filled with obstacles, forcing her to consider taking risks that go beyond standard procedure. As her path brings her closer to the same location, the possibility of crossing paths with Kham becomes inevitable, adding another layer of tension to the story. Inside the facility, Kham encounters a series of increasingly difficult challenges, including elite fighters who are specifically trained to stop intruders like him. These opponents use different combat styles and tactics, forcing him to adapt continuously and push his physical limits. One of the most intense sequences in this part occurs when Kham is surrounded in a confined space and must fight multiple skilled opponents at once. The choreography of the fight highlights his ability to stay focused under pressure as he uses quick movements, powerful strikes, and environmental awareness to survive. However, these battles come at a cost as he begins to show signs of fatigue and injury, making it clear that each step forward is becoming harder. Despite this, he continues moving deeper into the facility, driven by his determination to complete his mission. As he progresses, he finally reaches areas that confirm the presence of captured animals, revealing the true scale of the organization's operations and the cruelty involved. This moment adds emotional weight to the story as it reinforces the importance of his mission beyond personal loss. Eventually, Kham reaches a critical point within the facility where he is closer than ever to finding his elephant, but also faces the strongest resistance yet as the organization deploys its most powerful enforcers to stop him. These fighters represent the peak of the enemy's strength and are prepared for a direct confrontation. As the tension builds toward this inevitable clash, the entire situation becomes more intense with both sides fully committed. Kam's journey has brought him to the heart of the enemy's territory where there is no turning back. And as this part comes to an end, the stage is set for a major battle that will test everything he has learned so far, pushing him to his limits as he stands on the brink of either success or complete defeat. As the story of the Protector 2 moves into a more intense phase, Kham, portrayed by Tony Jaa, is now deep inside the central facility, closer than ever to finding his elephant, but at the same time facing the most dangerous resistance of his entire journey. The environment around him becomes increasingly hostile as the criminal organization fully activates its defense systems, locking down sections of the facility and sending their strongest fighters to eliminate him. At this point, Kam is no longer an unknown intruder, but the primary target of the entire network, which means every move he makes is being tracked and countered. Despite this pressure, he continues moving forward with determination, relying on both his fighting skills and his growing awareness of the environment. The battles in this part become more intense and physically demanding as he faces elite opponents who are trained to work together using coordinated attacks and strategic positioning to overwhelm him. These fighters are not easily defeated and force Kham to push beyond his limits, using every bit of strength, speed, and technique he possesses. One of the key elements of these fights is the way Kham adapts under pressure, combining traditional Muay Thai strikes with creative use of his surroundings, turning narrow spaces and obstacles into advantages rather than limitations. However, the toll of continuous fighting becomes more visible as he begins to show signs of exhaustion. His movements remain powerful but slightly slower, and his injuries start affecting his performance, adding a sense of realism and tension to the story. At the same time, the narrative expands to show more of the criminal organization structure, revealing that the facility is not just a storage location but a central hub where high value operations are controlled, including illegal trade networks and underground systems that extend beyond the city. This raises the stakes significantly as Kham realizes that his mission is connected to something much larger than he initially thought. Meanwhile, the female police officer's storyline reaches a critical turning point as she gathers enough evidence to justify direct action against the organization, but the delay caused by legal procedures creates frustration, pushing her closer to taking independent action. Her path begins to align more directly with Kam's as both move toward the same objective from different directions, creating anticipation for a possible encounter or collaboration inside the facility. Kham continues advancing despite increasing resistance, eventually reaching a heavily secured section that appears to be central to the operation. This area is guarded by some of the most dangerous fighters in the organization, individuals who are not only physically strong but also highly disciplined and experienced. The confrontation here becomes one of the most intense sequences in the film as Kham is forced into a prolonged battle where every move counts. The fight showcases a mix of speed, power, and endurance as he faces opponents who can match his abilities more closely than anyone before. Despite the difficulty, he manages to overcome them through sheer determination and tactical awareness. This victory brings him closer to his goal but also leaves him more physically drained, highlighting the cost of his relentless pursuit. As he moves deeper into the secured area, he begins to see clear evidence that his elephant is nearby, increasing the urgency of his mission and pushing him to continue despite his condition. However, the organization is not finished yet as they prepare their final line of defense, setting up the next stage of the conflict where Kham will have to face the strongest forces standing between him and his objective. As this part concludes, the tension reaches a critical level with Kham on the verge of achieving his goal but also on the brink of collapse due to the constant battles and pressure. The stage is now set for an even more intense confrontation where strength alone may not be enough and every decision will determine the outcome of his mission. As the story of the Protector 2 continues to build toward its peak, Kham, portrayed by Tony Jaa, now finds himself at the most critical stage of his mission, deep within the heavily secured sections of the central facility, where every step forward brings him closer to his elephant but also closer to the most dangerous enemies waiting for him. After fighting through multiple layers of guards and elite fighters, he is physically exhausted yet mentally more focused than ever. Understanding that he cannot afford any mistakes at this point, the environment around him becomes even more restrictive and controlled, with limited exits, narrow pathways, and constant surveillance, making escape nearly impossible and turning every movement into a risk. Despite these conditions, Kham continues advancing, using both his instincts and experience to navigate through the facility. His approach now shows a clear balance between aggression and strategy as he avoids unnecessary fights while still eliminating any direct threats in his path. Meanwhile, within the criminal organization, the leaders become fully aware that Kham has reached the inner sections of their operation, creating a sense of urgency and panic as they realize that their defenses are being broken one by one. They begin coordinating a final response by deploying their most powerful enforcers and tightening security around the area where the high value targets are kept. This includes the section where Kham's elephant is believed to be located. At the same time, the female police officer's storyline reaches a major turning point as she decides to take action rather than wait for official approval, gathering a small team and moving toward the facility with the intention of exposing the operation and stopping the criminals. Her decision reflects the growing realization that the system alone is not enough to handle such a powerful network. As she approaches the location, the possibility of her crossing paths with Kham becomes inevitable, adding another layer of tension to the unfolding events. Back inside the facility, Kham encounters one of his toughest challenges yet when he is forced into a direct confrontation with a group of highly trained fighters who specialize in coordinated combat. These opponents are disciplined and work together to limit his movement and control the pace of the fight, forcing him to adapt quickly and use both speed and precision to break their formation. The sequence becomes a test of endurance as the fight continues longer than usual, pushing Kham to his limits. His movements remain powerful, but the effects of previous battles are clearly visible as he struggles to maintain the same level of energy. However, his determination allows him to continue and eventually overcome the group. This victory brings him closer to his objective, but also leaves him in a weakened state, increasing the tension as the audience realizes that the final stages of the mission will be even more demanding. As he moves forward, he finally reaches an area where the presence of captured animals is undeniable, confirming that he is very close to finding his elephant. This moment carries strong emotional weight as it reinforces the purpose behind his journey and the importance of what he is fighting for. At the same time, the organization prepares its final line of defense by positioning its strongest fighters and setting traps designed to stop Kham at all costs. The atmosphere becomes more intense as the confrontation approaches, with both sides fully aware that the outcome will determine everything. Outside the facility, the police operation begins to unfold, creating additional chaos. As multiple forces move toward the same location with different objectives, this overlap of actions increases the complexity of the situation as it becomes unclear who will reach the objective first and how the events will unfold when all sides collide. As this part comes to an end, Kham stands on the edge of the final phase of his mission, physically drained but mentally prepared to face whatever comes next. The journey that began with a personal loss has now turned into a full scale battle against a powerful system, and the next steps will decide whether he succeeds in reclaiming what was taken from him or falls against the overwhelming force of his enemies. As the story of the Protector 2 continues to push toward its most intense and emotionally charged phase, Kham, portrayed by Tony Jaa, now finds himself deeper than ever inside the core of the criminal organization's central facility, a place that represents not just physical danger but the full power and reach of the system he is up against. And at this point in the narrative, it becomes clear that everything Com has gone through so far was only preparation for what lies ahead. Because the deeper he moves into this structure, the more the environment itself starts working against him. The corridors become narrower, the lighting dimmer, the exits fewer, and the sense of isolation stronger, creating a situation where every step forward feels heavier and more dangerous than the last. And despite being physically exhausted from continuous battles, Kham continues moving forward with a level of determination that goes beyond normal human limits. His breathing is heavier, his movements slightly slower compared to earlier fights, but his focus is sharper than ever because he knows that he is now extremely close to his goal, and this awareness pushes him to ignore pain and fatigue as he forces himself to continue. Meanwhile, within the criminal organization, the atmosphere begins to shift from confidence to urgency as the leaders realize that their defenses are being broken layer by layer, something that was never expected to happen so quickly or so decisively. Reports come in from different sections of the facility describing how entire groups of trained fighters have been taken down by a single man, and this creates a sense of fear among the lower ranks while increasing pressure on the higher command to stop Kham before he reaches the most sensitive areas. As a result, they begin coordinating a more aggressive response, deploying their most elite enforcers who are specifically trained to deal with high level threats. These fighters are not just strong but highly disciplined, capable of working together with precision and strategy, making them far more dangerous than anyone Kham has faced before. At the same time, security within the facility is tightened even further as access points are sealed, surveillance is increased, and traps are set in key locations to slow Kham down or force him into disadvantageous situations, turning the entire environment into a battlefield designed to break him both physically and mentally. However, Kham's experience and instincts allow him to navigate through these challenges with surprising efficiency as he begins to anticipate movements, avoid certain traps, and choose his battles more carefully, showing that his approach has evolved from pure aggression to a more balanced combination of strategy and force. One of the most intense moments in this part occurs when Kham enters a large enclosed section of the facility where he is suddenly surrounded by a group of elite fighters who have been waiting specifically for him. The setup is clearly a trap designed to end his progress, and for a brief moment the situation feels almost impossible to escape. But instead of panicking, Kham immediately shifts into combat mode, using quick movements and sharp awareness to create space and avoid being overwhelmed. The fight that follows is longer, more brutal, and more demanding than anything seen before as the opponents coordinate their attacks, forcing Kham to defend and counter simultaneously without losing balance or control. Every strike carries weight, every movement requires precision, and every second of the fight tests his endurance. The confined space adds another layer of difficulty as there is little room to maneuver, forcing him to rely on close range combat and rapid reactions. And even though he begins to show visible signs of exhaustion, including slower recovery between strikes and heavier breathing, he refuses to give up, pushing himself beyond his limits to survive the encounter. Eventually, through a combination of skill, timing, and sheer determination, he manages to break through their formation and defeat the group. But the victory comes at a cost as he is left physically drained and visibly injured, highlighting the toll that this journey is taking on him. As he takes a brief moment to recover, he begins noticing signs that he is very close to the area where captured animals are being held. The sounds, The environment and the structure of the facility all point toward a central holding section, and this realization brings a mix of relief and urgency because while he is closer than ever to finding his elephant, he also knows that the strongest resistance is still ahead. At the same time, outside the facility, the parallel storyline involving the female police officer reaches a critical turning point as she decides to move forward with direct action despite limited support, bringing her team closer to the same location and setting up a situation where multiple forces are about to collide, adding even more complexity to the already tense situation. Inside the facility, the leaders of the organization prepare their final line of defense, positioning their strongest fighters near the central holding area and ensuring that Kham will not be able to reach his goal without facing one last overwhelming challenge. As this part comes to an end, the tension reaches an extreme level with Kham standing on the edge of the final stage of his mission, physically weakened but mentally stronger than ever, fully aware that the next steps will determine whether he succeeds in reclaiming what was taken from him or falls against the combined strength of the enemies waiting ahead. And at this point, there is no turning back, no escape, only forward into the most dangerous confrontation of his journey. As the story of the Protector 2 continues to build toward its ultimate turning point, Kham, portrayed by Tony Jaa, now finds himself in the deepest and most dangerous section of the criminal facility, a place where the atmosphere itself feels heavy with tension and every movement carries the risk of immediate confrontation. At this stage of the journey, it becomes clear that Kham is no longer just an outsider fighting his way through enemies, but a direct challenge to the entire system that the organization has built. And this realization creates a shift in both his mindset and the response of his enemies because while Kham is driven forward by determination and purpose, the organization is now acting out of urgency and fear, deploying everything it has left to stop him before he reaches the central holding area. As Kham moves through the final corridors, the environment becomes more controlled and restricted with reinforced doors, limited visibility, and carefully placed guards who are no longer underestimating him but are fully prepared for combat. And despite his physical condition, which is clearly weakened due to continuous fighting and injuries, he maintains a steady focus, taking calculated steps and conserving his energy whenever possible, showing that his approach has evolved into a balance between aggression and control. Meanwhile, inside the organization, the leaders begin coordinating their final defense strategy, positioning their strongest and most trusted fighters in the last section. These individuals are not just powerful but highly trained specialists who understand how to work together and counter different fighting styles, making them the most dangerous opponents Kham has faced so far. As he enters this zone, the silence before the fight creates a moment of intense anticipation, almost as if both sides are aware that the next confrontation will determine everything, and within seconds that tension breaks as the elite fighters engage him in a coordinated attack, surrounding him and attempting to control the pace of the fight from the very beginning. The sequence that follows is one of the most physically demanding in the film as Kham is forced to defend against multiple directions while also creating opportunities to strike back. His movements, although slower than before, remain precise and powerful as he uses short, efficient techniques to conserve energy while still delivering effective blows. The confined space makes it difficult to maneuver, which increases the difficulty of the fight, forcing him into close range combat where timing becomes critical. Every second of the battle feels intense as he struggles to maintain balance between offense and defense. Gradually, the fight begins to shift as Kham adapts to their patterns, using his experience and instinct to break their coordination and isolate them one by one. This process takes time and effort, pushing him further toward his physical limits, but his determination refuses to let him stop. Eventually, he manages to overcome the group, though not without cost, as he is left heavily exhausted and visibly injured. His breathing becomes heavier and his movements slower yet his focus remains unbroken. At the same time, the situation outside the facility begins to escalate as the female police officer and her team initiate their operation, creating distractions and pressure on the organization that starts affecting their internal coordination. Alarms begin to spread, communication becomes unstable, and the overall control of the facility weakens slightly, giving Kham a narrow window to continue his advance. As he pushes forward, he begins to notice clear signs that he is approaching the central holding area where captured animals are kept. The sounds, the structure, and the atmosphere all confirm that he is very close to his objective. This realization brings a surge of urgency as he gathers the last of his strength and continues moving despite his condition. However, before he can reach his goal, the final barrier reveals itself as the organization's main enforcer steps forward, a fighter who represents the peak of their strength and is prepared specifically to stop Kham. The tension rises sharply as both stand facing each other, aware that this confrontation will decide the outcome of everything. The environment becomes silent once again, emphasizing the importance of the moment. As this part comes to an end, Kham stands ready for the final battle, exhausted but unyielding, knowing that everything he has endured has led to this moment, and that the next fight will determine whether he succeeds in reclaiming what was taken from him or falls at the final obstacle in his path. As the story of the Protector 2 reaches its most intense and phase, Cam, portrayed by Tony Jaa, now stands face to face with the most dangerous opponent of his entire journey, the main enforcer of the criminal organization, who represents not just physical strength but the final barrier between Kham and his goal. And at this point, everything slows down for a moment as the tension builds to its highest level, both fighters observing each other, understanding that this is not just another fight but the deciding moment of everything that has happened so far. The environment around them becomes silent except for the distant sounds of chaos spreading through the facility as the police operation outside begins affecting the internal structure. Alarms echo in the background, lights flicker, and the sense of urgency becomes overwhelming. Yet within this chaos, the focus remains entirely on the two figures standing ready to fight. As the confrontation begins, the intensity immediately surpasses every previous battle in the film. The enforcer attacks with controlled power and precision, using techniques that are clearly refined and designed to counter fighters like Kham, forcing him into a defensive position from the very start. Kham, already exhausted from the continuous fights, struggles to match the speed and strength of his opponent, making this encounter feel different from anything before, where for the first time he is pushed into a position where survival itself becomes uncertain. However, despite his condition, he refuses to give up, relying on instinct, experience, and sheer determination to stay in the fight. The battle becomes a test of endurance as both fighters exchange powerful strikes, counters, and movements that require perfect timing. The confined environment limits their space, increasing the pressure and forcing them into close combat where every mistake can be decisive. As the fight continues, Kham begins to adapt slowly, reading his opponent's patterns and finding small openings to counterattack. Each successful move gives him a slight advantage but also drains his remaining energy. The physical toll on him is clearly visible as his movements become heavier and his reactions slower, yet his will to continue remains unbroken. Meanwhile, the situation outside continues to escalate as the female police officer and her team push deeper into the facility, creating confusion among the criminals and dividing their attention. This external pressure begins to weaken the organization's control, indirectly affecting the ongoing battle by reducing the support available to the enforcer. As the fight reaches its peak, Kham manages to land a series of decisive strikes that shift the momentum in his favor. Using a combination of strength, timing, and precision, he breaks through his opponent's defense, leading to a final exchange that determines the outcome. With one powerful and well timed move, he defeats the enforcer, bringing an end to the most challenging fight of his journey. But the victory comes at a significant cost, as Kham is left almost completely exhausted, barely able to stand, yet still driven by the need to complete his mission without wasting time. He pushes forward into the final section where the captured animals are held, and finally, after everything he has gone through, he reaches the moment he has been fighting for as he finds his elephant. This scene carries strong emotional weight as it represents not just success but the end of a long and painful journey. However, even in this moment, the danger is not completely gone, as the collapsing control of the organization creates chaos throughout the facility, forcing Kham to act quickly in order to escape. As this part comes to an end, the focus shifts from confrontation to survival as Kham prepares to leave the facility with his elephant while the entire system around him begins to fall apart, setting the stage for the final resolution of the story where the consequences of everything that has happened will unfold. As the story of the Protector 2 moves toward its final resolution, Kham, portrayed by Tony Jaa, finally stands with his elephant after everything he has endured. But even though he has achieved his main objective, the situation around him is still far from safe because the facility that once operated with strict control and coordination is now falling into chaos due to the combined impact of Kham's actions and the police operation taking place simultaneously. Alarms continue to sound, guards move in confusion, and different sections of the organization begin to collapse under pressure, creating an unpredictable environment where danger can come from any direction. Despite his extreme exhaustion and injuries, Kham knows that he cannot stop here because reaching the elephant was only part of the mission and escaping safely is now the next challenge. The path out of the facility is no longer clear as security systems are failing and remaining members of the organization are trying to regain control, some attempting to stop Kham while others focus on securing their own escape. This breakdown of structure creates both opportunities and risks as Kham must navigate through the confusion while protecting the elephant at the same time. His movements become more cautious compared to earlier as he is no longer focused solely on fighting but also on survival and protection, guiding the elephant through damaged corridors and unstable sections of the building while avoiding unnecessary confrontation whenever possible. However, certain encounters become unavoidable as desperate members of the organization attempt to block his path, leading to shorter but still intense confrontations where Kam uses whatever strength he has left to clear the way. These moments highlight his determination, as even in a weakened state, he remains capable of defending himself and completing his mission. Meanwhile, the female police officer and her team push further into the facility, successfully disrupting the remaining operations of the criminal network and securing key areas. Their presence increases the pressure on the organization and accelerates its collapse, leading to the capture of several members and the exposure of illegal activities that were previously hidden. As both storylines converge, the possibility of direct interaction between Kham and the officer becomes more likely, representing the connection between personal justice and legal authority. At the same time, the leaders of the organization who manage to avoid direct confrontation begin attempting to escape, realizing that their control is slipping away and that the entire system they built is at risk of being destroyed. This adds another layer of tension as the situation is no longer just about Kham's mission, but also about the fate of the criminal network itself. As Kham continues moving toward the exit with his elephant, the structure of the facility becomes increasingly unstable due to the ongoing conflict and damage, forcing him to act quickly and make decisions under pressure. Every step becomes critical as he balances speed with caution, ensuring that he does not put himself or the elephant in further danger. The emotional weight of this part is significant because it shows the final phase of his journey not as a moment of celebration but as a test of endurance and responsibility. After everything he has fought through, he must still overcome one last challenge, which is to leave this dangerous environment safely. As the tension builds toward the final moments, Kham finally reaches the outer sections of the facility where the chaos begins to clear and the presence of law enforcement becomes stronger, signaling that the control of the organization is finally breaking down. This moment represents a turning point where the balance shifts completely and the system that once seemed untouchable begins to collapse. As this part comes to an end, Kham stands on the edge of freedom with his elephant, physically exhausted but emotionally fulfilled, knowing that he has come through the most difficult journey of his life. Yet the final outcome and full resolution of the story are still to be revealed in the concluding phase. As the story of the Protector 2 reaches its final conclusion, Kham, portrayed by Tony Jaa, finally emerges from the collapsing world of violence and chaos that he has been fighting through, standing at the edge of freedom with his elephant by his side, a moment that represents not just the end of his physical journey but also the emotional resolution of everything he has endured. The environment around him begins to shift from tension and destruction to a sense of calm as law enforcement takes control of the situation. The criminal organization that once operated with power and confidence is now broken, its members either captured or forced into hiding, and the system that supported their illegal activities begins to fall apart. This transformation highlights the impact of Kham's actions combined with the efforts of the police, showing how one determined individual can trigger the collapse of something much larger. Despite his success, Kham's condition reflects the cost of this journey as he is physically exhausted, injured, and pushed beyond normal limits. Yet he remains standing, driven by the satisfaction of completing his mission and protecting what matters most to him. The reunion with his elephant becomes one of the most emotional moments of the film, as it symbolizes not only victory but also the restoration of balance in his life. The connection between them is shown through subtle actions rather than words, emphasizing the depth of their bond and the meaning behind his struggle. Meanwhile, the female police officer's role reaches its resolution as her investigation leads to the exposure of the criminal network, validating her efforts and showing that justice can still be achieved through persistence and courage. Her storyline complements Kham's journey by representing the legal side of the conflict, where both paths ultimately lead to the same result, the destruction of the organization and the restoration of order. As the situation stabilizes, the focus shifts toward the aftermath of the events. The facility that once served as a center of illegal operations is now under control, and the impact of its collapse begins to spread beyond its walls as authorities uncover more details about the network's activities. This broader perspective adds depth to the story by showing that the consequences of these events extend beyond the immediate conflict, affecting the larger world connected to the organization. At the same time, Kham prepares to leave the city and return to a life away from violence, his mission complete and his purpose fulfilled. This decision reflects a return to his original values and the peaceful existence he was forced to leave behind. However, the journey has changed him, making him stronger, more aware, and more experienced. And although he may return to a quieter life, the impact of what he has faced will remain with him. As the film moves toward its closing moments, the tone becomes calmer and more reflective, allowing the audience to process everything that has happened and understand the significance of the journey. Kam's story is not just about fighting or revenge, but about loyalty, honor, and the willingness to stand against overwhelming odds for something meaningful. The final scenes reinforce these themes by focusing on his connection with the elephant and his return to a more peaceful environment, bringing the narrative full circle from where it began. As this final part concludes, the story leaves a lasting impression of resilience and determination, showing that even in the face of powerful enemies and impossible challenges, it is possible to achieve justice through strength, purpose, and unwavering commitment, completing a journey that started with loss and ended with restoration, closure, and a sense of earned peace. As the journey of the Protector 2 fully concludes, the story leaves behind not just an action packed experience but a deeper reflection on the character of Kham, portrayed by Tony Jaa, whose journey from a peaceful protector to a relentless warrior and back again forms the emotional core of the film. and even after the main conflict is resolved, the impact of everything he has gone through continues to resonate, because this is not simply a story about fighting enemies or recovering something that was lost, but about the strength of purpose and the willingness to face overwhelming odds without losing one's identity. Throughout the film, Kham is shown as a man of few words but strong actions, someone who does not seek conflict yet does not hesitate when forced into it, and this balance between calmness and intensity makes his character feel grounded and believable, especially as the story progresses and shows the physical and emotional toll of his journey. The action sequences play a major role in defining the film's identity, as they focus on raw, realistic combat rather than exaggerated or overly stylized fights, allowing Tony Jaa to showcase his martial arts skills in a way that feels authentic and impactful. Each fight builds upon the previous one, gradually increasing in intensity and difficulty, which keeps the audience engaged while also reinforcing the idea that Khan is constantly being pushed to his limits. At the same time, the film's setting adds depth to the narrative, as it contrasts the peaceful rural life with the chaotic and dangerous urban environment, highlighting the difference between a world built on tradition and one driven by power and control. The criminal organization serves as more than just a group of antagonists, as it represents a system that exploits both people and animals for profit, making Kham's mission feel more meaningful beyond personal revenge. The inclusion of the female police officer adds another layer to the story by showing the struggle between working within the law and taking direct action. Her journey complements Kham's by offering a different perspective on justice and responsibility, and together their efforts lead to the downfall of the organization. The film also stands out for its technical execution, particularly in its fight choreography and use of environment where everyday objects and surroundings become part of the action, creating dynamic and engaging sequences that feel unique and grounded. As the story reaches its final moments, the return to a calmer setting provides a sense of closure that contrasts with the intense journey that came before, allowing the audience to reflect on the transformation of the main character and the resolution of the conflict. Overall, The Protector 2 delivers a complete experience that combines action, emotion, and character driven storytelling, leaving a lasting impression through its themes of loyalty, honor, and resilience, and reinforcing the idea that true strength lies not just in physical ability but in the determination to stand for what is right no matter the cost. As the journey of the Protector 2 finally comes to its true ending, Kham, portrayed by Tony Jaa, leaves behind the chaos, violence, and destruction that once surrounded him, and begins returning to the peaceful life he was forced to abandon. And at this point, the story shifts completely in tone, as the fast paced action is replaced by a calm and reflective atmosphere, showing the aftermath of everything that has happened and the emotional weight that still remains. Although the criminal organization has been destroyed and justice has been served, the journey has clearly changed Khan as a person. His experiences have made him stronger but also more aware of the darkness that exists in the world. Yet, despite this, he chooses not to stay in that world and instead returns to the life that defines who he truly is. His connection with his elephant becomes the central focus once again, as it symbolizes not only victory but also restoration. The bond between them feels even stronger now because it has been tested and proven through extreme hardship. And this reunion is not presented with loud celebration but with quiet understanding, reflecting the depth of their relationship. As Khan travels back to his home environment, the contrast between the peaceful surroundings and the violent world he left behind becomes more meaningful, emphasizing the idea that his true place is not in conflict but in protecting what he values. Meanwhile, the broader impact of the events continues to unfold as law enforcement completes its actions against the remains of the criminal network, ensuring that the system responsible for so much harm is fully dismantled. This adds a sense of closure to the story by showing that the fight was not only personal but also had lasting consequences beyond Kam's journey. At the same time, the film subtly suggests that while one organization has fallen, others may still exist, leaving a realistic impression that the world is not completely free from such threats. But what matters is that in this moment, Kham has fulfilled his purpose and restored balance to his life. As the final scenes unfold, the focus remains on simplicity and peace, showing Kham walking alongside his elephant in a natural setting, far away from the chaos that once surrounded him. This imagery brings the story full circle, returning to the same kind of calm beginning, but now with a deeper meaning shaped by everything that has happened in between. The silence of these moments speaks louder than action, allowing the audience to feel the completion of the journey rather than just see it. Kam does not seek recognition or reward because his victory is personal and internal, defined by loyalty, honor, and the fulfillment of his responsibility. And as the film reaches its final frame, it leaves behind a strong message about resilience, purpose, and the importance of staying true to one's values even when faced with overwhelming challenges, completing the story in a way that feels both satisfying and meaningful, marking the true end of a journey that began with loss and ended with peace, restoration, and quiet strength. Atmosphere showing the aftermath of everything that has happened and the emotional weight that still remains. Although the criminal organization has been destroyed and justice has been served, the journey has clearly changed Calm as a person. His experiences have made him stronger, but also more aware of the darkness that exists in the world. Yet, despite this, he chooses not to stay in that world and instead returns to the life that defines who he truly is. His connection with his elephant becomes the central focus once again, as it symbolizes not only victory but also restoration. The bond between them feels even stronger now because it has been tested and proven through extreme hardship. And this reunion is not presented with loud celebration but with quiet understanding, reflecting the depth of their relationship. As Kam travels back to his home environment, the contrast between the peaceful surroundings and the violent world he left behind becomes more meaningful, emphasizing the idea that his true place is not in conflict but in protecting what he values. Meanwhile, the broader impact of the events continues to unfold as law enforcement completes its actions against the remains of the criminal network, ensuring that the system responsible for so much harm is fully dismantled. This adds a sense of closure to the story by showing that the fight was not only personal but also had lasting consequences beyond Kam's journey. At the same time, the film subtly suggests that while one organization has fallen, others may still exist, leaving a realistic impression that the world is not completely free from such threats. But what matters is that in this moment, Kam has fulfilled his purpose and restored balance to his life. As the final scenes unfold, the focus remains on simplicity and peace, showing Kham walking alongside his elephant in a natural setting, far away from the chaos that once surrounded him. This imagery brings the story full circle, returning to the same kind of calm beginning, but now with a deeper meaning shaped by everything that has happened in between. The silence of these moments speaks louder than action, allowing the audience to feel the completion of the journey rather than just see it. Kham does not seek recognition or reward because his victory is personal and internal, defined by loyalty, honor, and the fulfillment of his responsibility. And as the film reaches its final frame, it leaves behind a strong message about resilience, purpose, and the importance of staying true to one's values even when faced with overwhelming challenges, completing the story in a way that feels both satisfying and meaningful, marking the true end of a journey that began with loss and ended with peace, restoration, and quiet strength. अगर चाहो तो अब मैं पूरी मूवी का फुल यूट्यूब स्क्रिप्ट इंट्रो प्लस हुक प्लस आउट्रो प्लस एसईओ डिस्क्रिप्शन प्लस हैशटैग्स भी बना देता हूँ. As the story of the Protector 2 reaches its absolute final moments, the narrative takes a deeper emotional turn, focusing not just on the physical ending of the journey, but on the internal state of Kham, portrayed by Tony Jaa, who now carries the weight of everything he has experienced. And while the external conflict has ended, the inner transformation continues to unfold as he slowly walks away from the destroyed system of crime and violence that once stood as an unstoppable force. There is a strong sense that this journey has permanently changed him, not in a way that takes him away from his values, but in a way that strengthens his understanding of them, because throughout his mission, he has seen the worst sides of humanity, the exploitation, the cruelty, and the hunger for power. Yet he has also proven that determination and purpose can stand against even the most powerful systems, and this realization becomes part of his identity moving forward. As he returns to a quieter environment, the contrast becomes even more powerful. The noise of the city, the chaos of the fights, and the constant danger are replaced by silence, open space, and a sense of freedom, allowing both the character and the audience to breathe. After such an intense journey, his connection with the elephant is shown again in a calm and meaningful way, not through dramatic action but through simple presence, reinforcing the idea that this bond was always the true heart of the story and that everything he fought for was to protect this connection rather than to destroy his enemies. Meanwhile, the consequences of the events continue to settle in the background as authorities finalize their control over the situation, capturing remaining members of the criminal network and ensuring that the operations cannot continue. This quiet resolution adds realism to the ending as it shows that while the main conflict has been resolved, the world continues to move forward and the impact of these events will remain beyond what is directly shown. At the same time, there is a subtle sense of closure in Kham's journey as he no longer carries the urgency or anger that drove him into the city. Instead, he carries experience, resilience, and a deeper sense of purpose. The film avoids over explaining his future and instead leaves it open, allowing the audience to understand that his life will return to peace but will never be exactly the same as before. Because once someone has faced such intense challenges, they carry that experience with them. As the final scenes unfold, the focus remains on stillness and reflection, showing calm moving forward in a world that feels calmer yet more meaningful. And this choice of ending reinforces the central themes of the film, which revolve around loyalty, honor, and the idea that true strength is not just about fighting but about knowing what is worth fighting for. As the screen fades, the story leaves behind a lasting impression not through spectacle but through emotion, completing the journey in a way that feels grounded, complete, and deeply connected to the character's purpose, bringing the Protector 2 to a final and meaningful close that stays with the audience even after the story has ended. As we step back and look at The Protector 2 as a complete experience, it becomes clear that the film is not just about action or a simple rescue mission, but about a character driven journey centered around Kham, portrayed by Tony Jaa, whose path reflects a deeper exploration of loyalty, honor, and personal responsibility. And when the entire story is viewed from beginning to end, it shows a consistent progression where every event, every fight, and every challenge contributes to his transformation. At the start, he is a peaceful protector living a simple life, then he is forced back into a violent world, and by the end, he emerges as someone who has faced that world and chosen to rise above it rather than become part of it. This arc gives the film emotional weight that goes beyond its action sequences, even though the action itself plays a major role in defining its identity. One of the strongest aspects of the film is how it presents its fight choreography in a raw and grounded way, allowing Tony Jaa to showcase his martial arts skills with realism and intensity. The fights are not just there for visual excitement but also serve as storytelling tools that reflect Kham's state of mind. Early fights show his control and confidence, mid level confrontations highlight his determination and adaptability, and the later battles reveal his exhaustion and resilience, creating a layered progression that keeps the audience engaged while also adding depth to his character. At the same time, the setting of the film plays an important role as it contrasts the calm, natural environment of Kham's home with the chaotic and dangerous urban world controlled by criminals. This contrast reinforces the central conflict between peace and power, tradition and exploitation, and personal values versus corruption. The criminal organization itself is portrayed not just as a group of enemies but as a system that thrives on control and fear, making Kham's journey feel like a challenge against something much larger than individual opponents. Another key element is the inclusion of the police storyline, which adds a different perspective to the narrative, showing that justice can be pursued through both personal action and legal systems. And while Kham operates outside the law, his actions ultimately align with the same goal. Creating a balance between these two approaches, the film also stands out for its technical execution, especially in how it handles action sequences within confined spaces, using the environment creatively to enhance the intensity of each fight, making every location feel unique and purposeful rather than repetitive. As the story concludes and transitions into reflection, it becomes clear that the true strength of the Protector 2 lies in its ability to combine physical action with emotional meaning, leaving the audience with more than just memorable fight scenes. It leaves a message about standing firm in one's values even when faced with overwhelming challenges, about protecting what truly matters rather than seeking power, and about the idea that victory is not just about defeating enemies but about restoring balance and staying true to oneself. And this is what ultimately defines Kham's journey, making it not just a story of action but a story of purpose, resilience, and quiet strength that continues to resonate even after the film has ended. And with that, the journey comes to an end, not just a story of action but a story of loyalty, honor, and unbreakable determination, where Kham, played by Tony Jaa, proves that true strength is not about power but about protecting what truly matters. And even after facing impossible odds, he chooses peace over violence, reminding us that sometimes the greatest victory is simply holding on to your values and walking away stronger than before. So, if you enjoyed this full movie breakdown, make sure to like, subscribe, and support the channel for more deep movie reviews and action packed stories just like this. And don't forget to comment which movie you want next because your support keeps this journey going. And I'll see you in the next one.